My name is Mike Mauceli, and this is the Energy Show with REI Energy, where we're energizing your investments and maximizing your tax deductions. Today, we're going to be discussing electricity, and you're going to discover how electricity is priced and how you can build the best energy plan if you live in a deregulated state. My guest today is Holly Scott. Holly is the electric cowgirl. Uh, just to give our listeners a little background, Holly and we've worked together for about 5 years. I mean, if you're like me, I don't know a lot about electricity. I know that I have to pay my utility bill every month, so I really don't dig into what the prices are that I'm being charged. And Holly is actually an advocate. She is director of sales for River Oaks Energy. Great to have you on the show today, Holly.
Thank you, Mike. It's my pleasure to be here.
So as I was saying, a lot of people out there are like me, and we work with you on for the last 5 years on our commercial accounts. And you basically are an advocate for companies like ours, where you actually go out and shop electricity cost. And, really what I would like to start out, if you can give our listeners a little bit of background about yourself.
Absolutely. I love your reference to the electric cowgirl. When your bills start looking Western, it's time to call in a cowboy or cowgirl, right?
That's right.
So, I was born and raised in Brownwood, Texas, and was raised with strong moral fabric in my DNA. I believe in doing things the right way with ethics, transparency, and honesty. I went to UT in Austin, graduated with a degree in corporate communications, and then moved to the DFW area, and I was recruited into the energy industry. I've had the pleasure of working for 20 years in the industry, and it sure has changed since the time I began to now.
So how are electricity prices determined?
Electricity prices now are determined by more moving components in the market. Used to, it was you could look at natural gas prices, you could look at the weather, and you could look at supply and demand. We all know that here in Texas, it is the fastest growing state in the U.S. Our grid, as we experienced and saw in Storm Uri, needed some stabilizing, and different legislative undertakings have happened, and there's different complexities that need to be managed. It's no longer as simple as it used to be. We are looking at geopolitical concerns that influence it. Natural gas is traded as a global commodity now, importing, exporting, having enough capacity and reserve margin to support the demand. And it's only going to keep growing. Texas is.
Well, I know in the past that my electricity price obviously was determined by the price of natural gas. And like you said, now natural gas is traded on a global basis. I know in the energy industry, or in my industry, where, natural gas prices have really been pretty stable. I mean, if you look back over the last 5 or 6 years, I think the average price was about $3, $2.60, $3 an MCF. But now you have a lot of other components, as you were talking about, like wind energy, solar energy, nuclear energy. Sure. I mean, is that all factored into the determination of how these prices are set now?
Well, really, after Storm Uri, we are caught, and all of us realized our plants and the grid needed to be stabilized. One way of doing that is to winterize plants or generators, and a lot of ancillaries were created that weren't used to being a part of the navigating an energy contract.
Right.
Ancillaries are a big part of an energy cost now, or a fixed price, and they're baked into the end consumers. It's ancillaries basically, and especially non-spinning reserve. It's all about reserve margin. Texas demand is increasing. Our supply is slowly increasing thanks to all of the different resources that we have in the generation stack. but it's going to be a bit of a bumpy road for volatility. I mean, it's a very volatile market as it is, with geopolitical wars happening, with economic uncertainty. Certainly, the pandemic changed the framework for how everyone did business. And, it purchasing the right supply agreement, every end user has different needs. And it's my job. I've been in the energy market for, like I said, 20 years or more, and worked for the top or the largest three largest suppliers in Texas, learned a lot. I want to always go to where my customer's need is. I saw the customer's need moving. And what I mean by that is when things get more complex, you need an advocate in the room. It's kind of like going and shopping for a car. Every dealership, may have certain vehicles, but they all come with different specifications. I am the independent mechanic that looks under the hood and inspects it to make sure you get the best and the fairest deal for your business, what your needs are.
And so how many, well, I know if you're looking at phone companies, for example, there's 4 or 5 phone companies out there. How many electric, I guess that's very similar. How many electric companies are out there that you can go to and prices within a deregulated state?
Sure. There's thousands actually, but you want to work with with top tier suppliers for sure, which we have a vast array of and a great network, and leveraging relationships is a huge part of doing business, in my opinion. And I have built strong relationships within the industry, and am blessed for that. So there's a lot of REPs out there, retail electric providers.
So I guess there's some, like some of the major phone carriers, that
sure
you want to be with a company that is reliable.
There you go.
Working with a company that's reliable, so your electricity doesn't get cut off. Is that correct?
Absolutely. It's just common sense. You want to be with a provider that has presence, has been around, and who's investment grade and who you can count on to be there. Someone that's easy to work with. And I have relationships with all of the top suppliers, and I'm basically the advocate for my end user to make sure that they're getting the fairest deal for their needs.
And that includes, the best pricing, right? I mean,
it includes the best pricing. It includes the best pay terms. Certain end users may know about their load coming offline in 3 years. Well, I need to know about that, because we don't want to sign a 5-year contract and hedge 5 years worth of energy if there's going to be a major material change within those 5 years.
When you say load coming offline, what does that mean? They're not going to have enough electricity at that point, or?
No. Basically, let's just say that I'm working with XYZ manufacturing company, and they know that in 2026, they are going to take half of their manufacturing tools offline.
I see.
That will dramatically change their load forecast, and suppliers go out and hedge the energy all at once up front ahead of time. So it's my job to learn the intricacies of the end user first and know your needs. If you need pay terms that are different, you may need certain material change clauses. You may need a bandwidth that is unlimited, meaning there's no restrictions for how much electricity you use in any given month. You may, depending on what zone you're in, in Texas, there's 4 zones. There's North, South, Houston, and West. West zone and Houston seem to have congestion, more congestion. And that's a risk you don't want to take, and you want someone to help you mitigate that. It's all about timing. It's all about knowing how the customer wants to do business and assisting them in working through the process. It's
what I'm hearing. It's just not a one-time relationship where you just sign somebody up. I mean, you're working with that end user throughout the life of the contract. Is that correct?
You sure should be, because my job and my goal and my moral obligation, which I take very seriously, I'm passionate about it, is my customer's bottom line. When I have a customer, my customer becomes my family and therefore my responsibility. So yes, it is my job to watch the market. It is my job to understand how things are going within your business. And it's also my job to add value. Suppliers offer value adds. We offer value adds as your advocate. And that could come in the form of demand side management. It could come in the form of bill auditing. It could come in the form of connecting you with another company and leveraging relationships to add revenue to your bottom line in that way. I like to get creative, innovative, and use absolutely every tool possible to truly help humankind.
Do you work with customers in other states or just in Texas?
I do work with customers in other states. If you're deregulated, I can help you, whether it's natural gas or electricity. If it's a deregulated state, absolutely.
Now, you mentioned a little bit earlier about geopolitical issues affecting the price of electricity. Could you expound on that a little bit?
Sure. I think, with the war in Ukraine, and now we have, the Israel conflict going on, any uncertainty is going to freak traders out, basically. And they may take a short or a long position. Any economic uncertainty is going to affect how things are traded. That definitely plays a role in premiums being built into pricing because we don't know. Uncertainty raises the premium. Okay.
So when you say traded, I mean, does that mean these traders are trading electricity or are they trading natural gas?
Natural gas. Natural gas. Sure.
Okay.
And so when depending upon how they see the weather, how they see our economic system, where do they see us in 1 year, 2 years? It'll show up in your price how they see us, right?
Well, especially with this administration and their war on fossil fuels and wanting completely to get away from the use of fossil fuels, which is not going to happen. But, that obviously affects price. And I know over the last several years where, the war in Ukraine was going on, natural gas prices did spike. I think we got up as high as $12 an MCF. Now, and I know that here in the United States, we're trying to export more of our LNG to overseas. And of course, now like you were saying earlier, you not only have natural gas, you've got these green energy components, which I'm a fan of all types of energy. I think I've said that on my show a number of times. I mean, we've got close to 7 billion people here in this world, so we need every form of energy that we have. But I think a lot of people don't realize that a lot of this green energy is being subsidized by the federal government, which in essence is being paid for by the taxpayer. And so that's driving our cost up as well. So it's no longer, as you're saying, based on just natural gas prices. I mean, it's based on a lot of other factors out there.
It's definitely based on factors, and we do need a mix in the fleet. There's a need for solar, there's a need for wind, there's a need for fossil fuels. Perhaps we may have been too aggressive, we being they, whoever, in how fast we went towards a green movement. But I think that we are realizing and making those adjustments over time. And, there's legislation out there for that. But you're exactly right. We do need every kind, especially in Texas.
That all gets passed to the consumer, correct? I mean,
yes,
it just kind of filters down to the consumer in the end. So that's what's driving up a lot of if natural gas prices aren't going up and
Yes.
and these green energy subsidies are getting pushed down to the consumer, that's why a lot of our utility bills. Now, I know from your and I conversation in the past that if you can explain a little bit, you've got the electricity, but then you have the other company that basically delivers the electricity, and one of them is, a fixed cost and the other one's not. Can you kind of explain that?
Absolutely. And I want to touch on one point real quick before I go there. I would say that basically after Storm Uri, we noted that this grid had to be stabilized. We needed more generation assets. Over 30 years, it is being financed in order to stabilize the grid. Who is it coming to? All of us. So you are correct in what you're saying. The end user is seeing increased cost. It's also a volatile market. And then as far as components to an electricity bill, you do have your energy charge, and that's the charge where you have a choice. Just like you could go out and choose Verizon or AT&T, whoever, for your cell phone. That's what deregulation does, is it tries to make a fair marketplace, because we do want it to be fair, and we're lucky in Texas that we have that choice and that it is a deregulated state. But there's also the part that is the poles and wires company, and that's regulated by the Texas Railroad Commission. And there's not a choice there. So a lot of the stabilization efforts are also baked in to those charges as well.
So is that the charge? Excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt, but is that the charge that is paying for the upgrade to the grid? It's not the electricity cost. It's basically the ERCOTs of the world, I guess, is what you were saying a little bit earlier, that manages the grid. And as we all know, here in Texas, we went through a severe freeze in 2020. I know I was 5 days without electricity. So
yes, in 2021.
And
yes,
so our grid was underperformed, and thankfully our governor, we've been spending a lot of money on upgrading the grid and making sure that we have access to more power or more natural gas or electricity to make sure that the grid performs like it should, because we do, Texas is a very fast growing state, and we have a lot of people coming into the state. And so we've got to be able to provide, adequate electricity. And I'm glad from the fact that, we didn't go to a regulated state. I think that was one of the things they were talking about. Can you explain a little bit about regulated versus deregulated?
Regulated basically means the consumer doesn't have a choice. And, it would look just as I talked about the regulated part of the bill, that we don't have a choice over, like poles and wires companies in our area. You wouldn't have a choice at all. And basically you just are given what you're given. Thankfully, we do have a choice, and there are ways to mitigate risk. And that's what it's all about. It depends on how, what the risk tolerance is. But there are creative solutions and ways to mitigate the risk. And the main thing is just feeling like you're getting the true picture. Do no harm, but take no bull. That's kind of my mantra, meaning help the end user see the truth. And the truth is, yes, we do need all generation assets, but going out and getting an apples to apples comparison by yourself, good luck with that. Every retail electric provider constructs their pricing differently and their product structure differently. And you do need an expert. You do need an advocate to help you understand it if it's not something that you deal with every day.
So how do you work with big companies? I mean, do you look at their past electric use and then try to determine?
Absolutely. Basically, we would get a list of, the meters that they have, and visit with the decision maker and whoever's involved about what their vision is, what their needs are, if they have pain points, what their risk tolerance is, what they've been doing. And then we get to work and we go out and say, here's what we need. And it levels the playing field, and having an advocate legitimizes the fact that that you're going to focus on your core business, and the energy market's complex. So you're just going to have someone to watch your back for you. That's what I'm here to do. Watch your back.
So in essence, if you're working with a company, say they own a large hotel, and so you go in and you look at how much electricity they're using on average, how much potential savings is there from someone working with someone like yourself or your company?
Well, it depends, 5 years ago, we were in the market where there were days where, I was signing contracts at 3 cents per kilowatt hour.
As that compare to what a residential client pays?
Right. Now you're walking in to a customer and saying, hello, Mr. Customer and Mrs. Customer. I have great news for you today. Except it's not such great news. But what goes up must come down. And so here, my goal is to tell the truth, be transparent, and just say, I'm here to help. We're going to make it through this. And hey, Texas is growing. It's not a bad thing. And green's not a bad thing. But let's manage it with common sense, courtesy, respect, and let's help our fellow man get the fairest deal for their specific needs.
Well, it's definitely been an interesting time with the Green New Deal. I mean, obviously, it seems like inflation's going up, our cost of oil is going up. Just anything we do. I mean, I'm not a big fan of Bidenomics, and I think a lot of people out there are finally figuring it out. It's not great at all. And, but having said that, I mean, it is something that has been set in motion, and we do have windmills, we do have solar panels,
right.
And stuff like that. So, like you were saying, going forward in the future, I mean, you just have to manage that. And you have to look at that cost, and that's what you and your company does.
Yeah, and had we not had wind and solar this summer, the grid would have had I don't know what storm hell. I don't know what we would call that, but it would be like Storm Uri, because those assets are needed. However, the sun does not always shine and the wind does not always blow.
Right.
So there is a need for all. And when you asked me earlier, you said, those costs that are baked in, those we're all absorbing the cost. The retail electric providers are absorbing the cost. The regulated part, or the poles and wires people, are absorbing costs. And it's being passed through to the end user oftentimes.
So Holly, you work with commercial accounts. You don't work with residential, right?
I have always been in the large commercial and industrial business sector. However, we do have residential programs for companies so that their employees can take advantage of already pre-vetted rates. Because you know what? When I got my residential bill, I thought that they were tipping themselves the other day. And, it's just not always so simple. And so again, energy, it's not just big businesses that need help. It's also helpful for people that live in an apartment to know, that people that have 500 to 1,000 square feet need to be very careful about the terms and conditions of their residential contract, because if you don't use a certain amount of usage, you may be dinged and be paying a different rate than what you see. So we try to streamline everything for everyone, and we're going to offer value in every way that we can to simplify and streamline the process of procuring electricity.
So you could potentially work with a multifamily
absolutely
company that basically owns apartments, and they can offer different electric plans to their tenants, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, it's been a great conversation. And can you tell our listeners how to get in touch with you?
Absolutely. And there will be a QR code at the bottom. But my name's Holly Scott, and you can reach me at holly@riveroaksenergy.com or 214-926-3035. Thank you so much, Mike, for having me on.
Well, thank you for coming on. I think a lot of people want to understand about these utility bills, and if they can save money, especially in this environment, I think it's a big benefit for everyone. I know it has been for us. Thanks
We're going to make
Holly.
it through. Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to The Energy Show with REI Energy. Energize your investments and maximize your tax deductions. To learn more, go to reienergy.com.
This podcast is a presentation of Rich Dad Media Network.